Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, and as you can see this week I'm wearing a South African cricket shirt. Now it's not because Otis Gibson has decided to mark his new tenure as South African coach by calling me up. It's because for the last 5-6 weeks I've been harassed by Faf du Plessis, the national captain. I bumped into him at the airport, I saw him at an event I was hosting, I've been getting WhatsApps, text messages, emails, I think he even tried to send me a fax, all with one simple question: have you tried it yet? And it refers to a Cinsault, the Centurion, that's the latest addition to the range of wine that Faf is making. Not himself, but under a label that he owns with fellow South African cricketer AB de Villiers, the former New Zealand captain Stephen Fleming, who will be Faf's coach at the Stellenbosch Monarchs in the upcoming Global T20 League, and Mike Hussey, the Australian, who's about 70 now but is still playing international cricket. And this Cinsault, made out of Rickety Bridge under the Infinity Wines First 11 Wines label, is one that Faf has been raving about. So I thought, well, let me try it this week, get Faf off my back, and also try some other sporting wine. And I've got some wine with a golf link and some wine with a rugby link as well. But the first is that Cinsault from Faf, from the Centurion. They've only made 1,000 bottles, so I'm pretty lucky to get my hands on one. Faf du Plessis is very, very passionate about his wine. There are plenty of celebrities who've simply thrown their name at different brands. Faf gets properly involved in this. He loves it, he tastes it, he's part of the whole process, and even when he's away touring the world, he keeps a close eye on what's happening with the brand. Food and wine is a genuine interest. He's also the co-owner of a lovely restaurant just outside of Stellenbosch, but it's this wine that's really got him going, and it's one that adds to a list of wines that I think have done really nicely. They're not overly expensive. They're all in the sort of 150 Rand or thereabouts bracket. The Belter in particular I thought was very nice indeed. But Faf insists that there's something quite special about this. So I'm waiting to see if it lives up to the hype. Cinsault is undergoing a revolution in South Africa. We're seeing more of it, more winemakers are producing it, and the quality of it, by and large, is really good. But this is exceptional. This is an absolutely gorgeous bottle of wine. Faf, I thought I was going to have to let you down because I thought you might have been a little over-enthusiastic with your interpretation, but you haven't. This is absolutely delightful. And I'm only sorry there are only 1,000 bottles of it. I'm going to see how many more I can get. But this suggests that as good a cricketer as he might be, there's also a fair palate to Faf du Plessis as well. A real lightness of touch to that Faf du Plessis Cinsault. Really brilliant wine, but not washed out. Cinsault with a real feel to it. But it comes from a grape Cinsault that you expect to be light and delicate, and that's exactly what you'd expect from a Pinot Noir as well. Now this is not from traditional Pinot Noir territory. We tend to think Hemelanarde Valley in principle, down into Elgin, parts of Stellenbosch, in terms of where we get our best Pinot Noir from. This is from nowhere near there. This is somewhere between George and Oudtshoorn, which is not celebrated around the world as being prime winemaking territory. But it's where Retief Goosen has been making his wine. I've been lucky enough to go out there to have a tasting a number of years ago. It's a beautiful stretch of land, and the wine they've been making now has been going for some time. So much like Faf is really passionate about his wine, so Retief Goosen has invested some time, some energy, and is in for the long run with the Goose wine range that he's behind. One of my bugbears with wine, wax does look really good. It adds a touch of romance. There's a nostalgic feel to it, how wine was sealed many hundreds of years ago, but it is annoying to open, and you tend to get wax absolutely everywhere. Now, sometimes there's a really good reason. The previous wine, the Faf du Plessis wine, that's actually made with wax that he uses to wax his chest on a weekly basis, but I'm not sure it's 100% necessary. Still, it's opened up. The Pinot Noir is ready, 5 years old, and this is the very first time I'm trying this particular grape from Mr. Goosen. So there are a number of South African golfers who've got involved one way or another in the wine industry. Ernie Els is the most prominent of them. His wine is outstanding and he's had great success around the world. Louis Oosthuizen is now making some very pleasant wine. David Frost made some wine for a while, as did Gary Player. Retief Goosen has been making his wine for a while now. This is probably not quite as nice for me as the Expression, which I've always really enjoyed, but it's still a nice enough Pinot Noir. Always a difficult grape to make. This is 5 years old. It actually tastes as though it could be a little bit older than that, just in the way it has aged. It's from a cool mountain area, so it's a rugged part of South Africa, a beautiful part of South Africa, and not the worst place to be making Pinot Noir. And I think Retief has come up with something that's pretty decent. It's maybe not to be celebrated quite as much as his 2 US Open victories, which were outstanding, but it's certainly another very admirable string to the bow that is Retief Goosen. Then on to Robertson, and an estate that I featured earlier this year when I did a couple of shows around the Cape Wine Auction. Excelsior were part of the Cape Wine Auction, supporting it, and they also support a golfer, and that's why I've included them here. We know them for their horses. They've got a terrific stud as well as the wine estate, but they also support a young Sunshine Tour golfer called Joaquin Hess. He's in the early stages of his career. He's showing a great deal of promise, but he's also a wonderful ambassador for golf and for South Africa and for Excelsior. Every time there's a tournament that I've been part of or gone down to visit, he's gone out of his way to do clinics for young kids and to help out, to really put something back. He's the kind of South African we need more of. And when I saw him last, he came up to me with a big smile. He said he wanted to be on the Dan Nichols show, my other show, as a guest, but he'd also like to see some Excelsior wine on Dan Really Likes Wine, and he very kindly gave me a bottle of the Excelsior Merlot. So I'm very happy to celebrate it today because it's an estate I've always enjoyed. I've been out to Robertson on numerous occasions, and Excelsior is one of the estates I visited on the Absa Cape Epic, which happens every year, part of my Epic wine route. It's a lovely little part of the world. They make some extremely pleasant wine. It's just beautiful to visit. And I think Robertson's a very underrated corner of the wine tourism market we have here in South Africa. I'd like to see it celebrated a little more. And when you have people like Joaquin Hess talking about the wine and celebrating it, then they're certainly heading in the right direction for that to happen. So much of wine is about expectation. If you see something as a 5-star platter, you're expecting to be blown away. If you see a wine for 20 Rand, you're thinking, well, this probably isn't going to do a huge amount for me. Now, this is a wine that's not pretending to be a 5-star platter wine. It's not costing you hundreds of Rand. It's very much a blue-collar example of simple, everyday drinking Merlot. But Robertson is an area of South Africa that makes, across the board, some really good wine, but in particular, the kind of entry-level wine that I feel often delivers so much more than you'd expect from its price point. And that's generally something I've found on my visits to Excelsior. And that's what I was expecting, but very happily so, because I've had a lot of Excelsior wine in the past. It's a very fruity, very bright wine. It's got a nice big feel to it. It's not going to last another 10 years in your cellar. It's something to drink in the next couple of years, and it's something to drink when you get home from work and you just fancy a couple of glasses of nice, simple, pleasant red wine. It's softened around the edges, as you'd expect a Merlot to be. Another year or two certainly won't hurt, but it's just a nice, simple red wine, big smile on its face, much like Joaquin Hess, in fact. It's just really pleasant, really fun, and something you just keep around the kitchen for when you need a glass. So making some nice wine, but for me also supporting a young South African golfer, Joaquin Hess. Remember that name. And finally, to an old mate of mine. Now, the first time I met this gentleman properly, I was in Scotland hosting the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships, an event I'm lucky enough to go over to every year, and I'd introduced Schalk Burger Sr., the Springbok great, father of the more recent Schalk Burger, as being the man who did the stunt double work for Hagrid in the Harry Potter movies. Everybody had a good chuckle, and 10 minutes later, once the evening was done, I found myself picked up by the scruff of my neck, walked out of the property and dropped over a wall into the grass below, and about 15 kilograms of Boerewors-like finger was wagged at me as Big Schalk Burger just looked at me and said, "Nya Soti." Since then, we've become really good mates. I've been out to Hvalbirdhukt on many an occasion. It's a lovely estate. It hosted Martin Tucker's celebrity wedding a few years ago, and it's a place that's also home to some really nice wine. And it's wine with stories in abundance. If you ever get cornered by Schalk, he can talk to you about wine for hours. It's enormously entertaining, but make sure you don't have anywhere else to go for the rest of that day. And a lot of the wine at Hvalbirdhukt has a name to it, named after members of the family or named after aspects of the estate. There's the number 6, which is an award-winning blend that pays tribute to the current Schalk Burger and his Springbok days in the number 6 jersey. So too there's the cricket pitch, which we featured on the show before. There actually is a cricket field at Hvalbirdhukt, and not many people know that both of these Schalk Burgers have got a very rich cricketing heritage. And then there is this, the Hat-Trick, and it refers not just to the love of sport that the Burger family celebrate, but also to the trio of wines that go into this. Now, Schalk is an immensely proud South African. He loves this country, he's very patriotic, and he speaks very proudly, very honestly about the country, if you follow him in particular on social media. And so this is a blend that I know he paid a lot of time and attention to, because it's a Cape blend. It's 50% Pinotage, and that forms the basis of the Hat-Trick. And it's a wine that's now 10 years old. I've been saving it for an occasion, and I think this is as good as any. Now, first thing you'll notice is that rusty ruby colour to it, a sign that the wine is certainly an older one. Now, I got this passed on to me by a friend, so I'm not sure how it was stored, and I've got a feeling it maybe wasn't stored in quite as an ideal set of conditions as it perhaps should have been, particularly because it is a lot rustier than you might imagine for wine that is just 10 years old. But I'm hoping to still pick up the hallmarks that have made this another one of Schalk Burger's success stories. Sadly, I think I was right about the storage. It's maybe not quite in the prime condition I know it could be if I got it direct from Schalk's cellar, so my apologies. But that notwithstanding, there's still a lot that speaks of this as a quality South African wine. The Pinotage base, very much there to feel, the earthy tones coming through very nicely, but supplemented by a fairly healthy splash of Syrah, about 35% Syrah, and 15% Merlot in there as well, just smoothing through everything, ironing it over, and creating a nice rounded blend. 10 years old. If I'd kept it in here or at Schalk's cellar, probably have another 5 years in it. This particular bottle may be coming to the end of its run, but it's still a great example of a Cape blend, something that we rightly celebrate, but also another rich tribute to a sports person who's taken their passion for sport and translated it to wine as well. Schalk Burger, Faf du Plessis, Joaquin Hess, Retief Goosen, just some of the many South African athletes who've either lent their name to wine or are making wine, and across the board we've got some really fun results and some terrific success stories. If we can see those on the field as well as in the cellar, I'll be a happy man. Cheers.